You weren't expecting this video just yet, have you? And honestly, I wasn't either. But I was lazily sitting at work this Monday, as you do, browsing my work emails and thinking of things I've not done in a while. And among other, mostly private and very personal ones, was an obscure DOS games video. So, since it was the only one I could pull a trigger on then and there, and a long overdue start to the second season of the series, that's what I did, and here we are today. Major Stryker, as opposed to Minor Stryker, which was my nickname in high school, don't ask why, I'm embarrassed, is Apogee's Masters of Shareware another successful attempt at vertically scrolling shoot 'em up. And as with most of their games, this one too, whether it needs it or not, has a story. Because why the hell not? So 8 years after the end of the Third World War, aliens known only as Cretons attacked the Earth. And we were so close, you know? If they were only called Cretins, not Cretons, it could have been so much easier. But to no avail, it seems. So the plan was formed to hit them where it hurts the most, within their own star system. You, my indestructible, fearless viewer, play as Major Harrison Stryker, and are tasked by the lovely Admiral Yoshiro of going to aliens' free planets and destroying their military installations. It's a last strike type of a mission, so if you fail we're doomed, and there will be no more bacon. So keep it in mind that your failure will effectively erase the salty delicacy from the universe forever. And that is something we cannot allow, and also worth fighting for, right? Major Stryker is composed out of 3 thematically unique and fun to mow through worlds, filled with numerous alien bodies and installations to destroy. There's also numerous various weapon upgrades and shields, and a whole plethora of power-ups changing how your ship behaves, influencing the gameplay itself, or adding bombs to your arsenal. The 3 difficulty levels available to pick between in the game are considerably different from one another, changing the number of enemies dramatically and also access to available power-ups. The bigger the challenge, the more points you get though, so if you're aiming for the score run, always pick the highest. Major Stryker is a tough game, so it's best to train on lower difficulties first before moving to more demanding ones. The graphics are as good as they can be on EGA, featuring large backgrounds and various unique sprites for enemies and foreground objects alike. Oh, and 3 levels of parallax scrolling, so something that was more often expected in VGA titles and not 16-color EGA games. If you're a fan of shooters, Major Stryker is a no-brainer, the game, not the soldier, and if you're not, then, well, it's not gonna change your mind about them. Boom, kapow, badoom, kerbang, and any other onomatopoeias that come to mind when thinking of bombs and explosions. That's what this little gem is all about. Bombs and explosions all around. While many of the late Polish Amiga games were not great, Mega Blast, that originated on the Amiga before being released on PC, is, well, mega fun that is. It's an excellent multiplayer game that can easily serve as a highlight of any retro evening with friends, providing hours of entertainment and competitive action regardless if drinks are involved or not. Though I would suggest, if I may, wink wink nudge nudge, that some juice boxes would be available at hand's reach. If you ever played Dyna Blaster or Bomberman, you know nearly everything that there is to know about Mega Blast. It's a maze-based versus game where players use bombs with delayed explosions to clear mazes' destructible walls and, most importantly, get rid of each other. The walls, when destroyed, may contain hidden bonuses and power-ups like increased explosion range, extra bombs, faster movement, so basically same stuff found in original Bomberman. But not only. There are also quite a few new ones, like ability to throw bombs, and these thrown bombs bounce off of each other, and maze walls too, ability to walk through walls, mixed up controls, cause yeah, not all pickups have to be helpful, and bombs slipping out of your hands, which makes your character drop them automatically, which as you might have guessed is as annoying as it is fun in the heat of a battle. And all these are just the tip of a mountain of positive and negative power-ups that make Mega Blast so much fun. Up to 4 players can enjoy it on a single computer, and believe me, the more of you there are, the more chaotic and fun it gets. Having to keep an eye on all the bombs dropped by others, and not only yourself, and launching chain explosions is not only addicting as hell, but also makes you want to come back for more, even if you're the victim of one of those chains. I initially played Mega Blast on the Amiga, but when I moved to PC I made sure to have a copy too, as it's a timeless classic that never gets old and can be enjoyed and appreciated today as much as it could in 1995. But not all is sunshine and rainbows in the explosive world of Mega Blast. Because its strongest and best feature, so fast-paced adrenaline rush-inducing multiplayer, is also its biggest weakness. Because while it can be played alone against the CPU, it's just not the same game. CPU can never replace a real player, and all those things that make the game hectic and irresistible in multiplayer grow old in single-player mode very quickly. Mega Blast is a versus player game by design and should be approached only as such. Note that down. Mega Blast. That seemed like a great game, right? Well, not all Mega-named games are made the same. Mega Phoenix, while not bad per se, is not even remotely as good as previous Mega game was. It's a single-screen wave shooter similar to Galaga or Galaxian and also retouched remake of an earlier arcade original, Phoenix. So you're always at the bottom of the screen, moving left and right only and shooting upwards at ever-coming waves of enemies. The first wave is usually composed out of several small enemies arranged in patterns and attacking you at random in short intervals. Second consists of same, bigger enemies, the Phoenixes. These are more deadly and challenging to beat, apparently. The third only has one enemy, but it's the titular Mega Phoenix itself. When it's downed, there's the Phoenix ship, which is even bigger, deadlier and has few smaller ships helping it out. If you manage to defeat it, the game repeats all waves at higher difficulty. And I'm sure that you see already where the main issue of Mega Phoenix is, right? It's same waves, with same enemies, time and time again. Only a bit more difficult each time. It grows old fast, believe me. Especially that there's no extra weapons, no upgrades, and all you have to use against the Phoenixes are your trusty cannon and shield. Which is not very helpful if I'm to be honest. So if you have a live goal and absolutely have to experience all those shooters, then yeah, give it a go. It's not that bad if you wanna play it once or twice only. But Mega Phoenix is definitely not a game to find a permanent stay in your gaming library. I promise that this game is the last in this video starting with Mega. But definitely not the last time I will use the word though. I vouch that before this video ends, I will use Mega at least 10 times. Maybe more, who knows. You can count it with me. Anyway, Megatron VGA is a first-person maze-based 1v1 shooter in which you're behind the controls of huge bipedal mech. The maze is not traversed fluidly as in most other FPS titles, but in steps, kinda like you moved in early RPG dungeon crawlers, Eye of the Beholder and the likes. Which, while not a big issue, is not great if you aim for your game to feel fast-paced and action-packed. It's obvious from the first play that devs clearly didn't. And with a name like Megatron I expected much more. It's a name I imagine a generic in-game villain shouting into the depth of a fiery volcano mountain on top of which he stands on, holding his clearly wounded and profoundly bleeding side mere seconds before falling into it to die. Instead we got a slow, single-step movement system and even more disappointing shooting. Oh well, whatever, it is what it is. You have two weapons available, one is fast-shooting rapid laser, that does very little damage but is basically always available, and the second are slower missiles, which may take a while to reload and shoot, but offer considerably more substantial damage. So obviously the strategy for success involves shooting rockets whenever you can and spamming laser blast in between. Sticking to just one type of a weapon will hardly ever end well for you. Though it's highly questionable if playing this game will end well for you whichever way you do it. There's two robots to choose from, Medcat and Vulture, but for the life of me I cannot tell a difference between them other than how they look. So, gameplay consists mainly of you and CPU wandering around the boring grey maze in jumpy steps looking for each other. When you do eventually find yourselves, a shootout commences, and more often than not, 10 seconds is enough for one of you to emerge victorious. Shots, be it lasers or missiles, seem to have 2-3 frames each only, and same goes for explosions. As a result, it does not only look rather bad, but also feels unresponsive and unsatisfying. So personally I wouldn't suggest going out of your way to track Megatron VGA down, it's not worth your time. Metal Gear, a game that catapulted Hideo Kojima's career into stardom and made him a household name, like Kleenex or Cheerios or Pampers. What a legend. It's an amazing first title in a long-running series of incredibly popular stealth espionage action games that span numerous titles and over 30 years of releases, that not only introduced many of the concepts well known in gaming today, but also was a pretty captivating and well-playing story in its own right. You play as now famous but then virtually unknown Solid Snake, an agent of so-called Foxhound, and you're on a mission to infiltrate the Outer Heaven, a small fortified nation in which the villain of the game resides and threatens the world with the titular Metal Gear. A walking tank that's capable of launching nuclear warheads from anywhere in the world. Your mission is to save Grey Fox, another of Foxhound's agents, and gather as much intel on Metal Gear as possible. To do so, you must be as invisible as Bat. Man-Bat. I'm Batman. I know you are, Bruce, but I'm talking about another half-man, half-monstrosity. You don't know each other, he's more of a vigilante type of a hero, you know. He doesn't work with authorities and does everything his own way. Kinda like heroes from 80s action movies. He's a good-hearted bad boy and not a bad-hearted do-gooder. I'm Batman. Yes, you are. So, as I was saying, stealth is your best friend in Metal Gear, cause while you can approach the game from strictly shooter point of view, it will bring you nothing but continuous and disappointing failures. You have to avoid contact with the enemy whenever you can, keeping in mind that they can actually for the first time in gaming see. So staying out of their visual range, hiding behind objects, under cardboard boxes, or even walking behind them is a key to success. You'll also gather weapons and keys for doors, and believe me when I tell you that silenced pistol is your best friend in Metal Gear, cause there wasn't many other as satisfying moments in gaming in 1990 as sneaking behind the level worth of enemies and killing them all one by one by silent shots. There's obviously many more weapons and items in Metal Gear, and most can be used to approach and complete the missions / levels in one way or another, so a replay value is quite high with this one. DOS's version, while obviously not being as popular as NES original was nearly as good of a game and could provide hungry for movie-like action teenagers days of high-pressure fun. And yes, I do realize that Metal Gear itself is not obscure in any sense of the word, but this 1990s DOS port was nowhere near as well known as original was. And it's a pity, cause despite some very dated presentation, it's a hell of a game. Would you believe me if I told you that one of the most fun two-player games in this video looks like something that you could prepare all the graphics for in Microsoft Paint in a span of 10 minutes or on your coffee break? Miceman is an excellent two-player versus board puzzle game, but only when played against a friend. As per usual, when you play it against CPU, sooner or later you'll work out flawless strategies to beat it every single time. So keep in mind that only full registered version allows for two-player fun. Shareware only works against CPU. Now, I told you that it's well worth finding and playing, I told you which version to track down, but I still haven't told you how to play it, and that's the most fun part of it. So the game board is 19 by 13 squares, with 12 mice pieces for each player sitting at opposing sides of the board, red and blue. The board is randomized each play, so no two games are ever alike. Well, unless one of you is exceptionally good at it, and the other utterly sucks. And it's definitely not you losing, cause there's only few as bright, as intelligent and quickly adapting people in the galaxy as you are, and chances of them being in the same place and time as you are virtually non-existent. The general idea here is simple: get your 12 mice to the opposing side before your opponent does the same. So each player takes their turn and can move one column up or down by one square unit. They wrap around, so going over at the top brings the contents of said column's top row to its bottom, and vice versa. When the player ends his move, all of his mice that are not blocked by blocks of cheese move as far as they can. They can move forwards and up and down freely, so the cleared path doesn't have to be straight line. When that's done, it's the other player's turn. The caveat here is that you can only move a column that has at least one of your mice in it, you cannot move a column that your opponent just moved, and you cannot move the same column more than 6 times in a row. Those limits do not apply, however, if all your remaining mice are in the same column. When both players happen to have just one mouse left, the game enters a sudden death mode, and leaves you with only 8 turns left till it ends automatically. When it does, player whose mouse is moved further ahead wins. If they're at the same distance, it's a draw. Miceman is an excellent versus board game that, while not identical to, does conceptually feel similar to the Piracy on C64. Which was another incredibly addictive in its simplicity versus board title. If you like two-player versus board puzzler games that require involving your grey mass in them, Miceman is well worth its price. Also, it's one of Manbat's favorite games because it involves mice, which he eats from time to time, as bats do. Let me start by saying that Mimi and the Mites is a freeware game, so it was entirely free even when it released. Keep that in mind when judging it. It is also very unusual, taking in spades from other classics to create its own unique gameplay loop. It feels like an odd mixture of Lemmings and Amiga's classic Benefactor. Not as good as either, but good nonetheless. So Mimi is a single-screen puzzle platformer with a very heavy, though not apparent at first, focus on the puzzling. The goal of each screen is to get Mimi to exit unharmed, and the titular mites are out to get her, and will actively chase her all throughout the game. And if they touch her, you'll lose a life. I'm Batman. No, obviously I wasn't threatening them, Bruce. I didn't mean their lives, but Mimi's life. The one in their proverbial hand. Sorry guys, he gets very agitated whenever violence is mentioned. So, one would think that obviously you'd need to avoid or dispose of the mites that chase you, right? And while you can sorta do the latter by zapping them with your gun or jumping on them from above ledges, temporarily stunning them, they cannot be killed. And it's good, because in most levels you actually need them to solve the puzzles that will allow you to leave. You will have to often lure them with your Mimi towards the switches, pressure plates and likes, cause there are some that only mites can activate. And these need to be used to either remove barriers or other features that stand in your way to freedom. You will then have to risk life and limb so that mites would activate those for you, more often than not timing it right so that in the same time you could activate another, as some need to be toggled at the same moment to work. The more you play and the further you get in the game, the more interesting mechanics and uses for mites will become apparent. At no point, however, you will be thrown into deep water. All will be introduced gradually, giving you ample time to learn and master them. You will unlock new weapons and ammo too, which can be used in various scenarios to help you. Mimi and the Mites is not an easy game, And despite it being fair and letting you familiarize yourself with everything that it offers, it will be challenging all the way through. But it's also a forgiving one. So if you keep failing at particular level all the time, the game will straight up ask you if you want to skip it, and continue playing and having fun from the following one. I would obviously suggest not skipping anything, as each challenge teaches you something that may be useful later on, but if you absolutely can't stand repeating something time after time again, and honestly I'm that kind of a person too, then by all means, go ahead. In the end, for a free game, Mimi and the Mites is an interesting and unusual take on puzzle platforming and one well worth checking out. You know what's worse than murders? Surprisingly, there's few things actually. Wars. Yes, wars are worse. Also mass murders. That's a bad one too. Ritualistic suicides are pretty depressing as well. And catastrophes claiming countless innocent victims are terrible too. And I just realized that those last few sentences alone may have cost me monetization on this video. Oh well, such is life. And you gotta say what you gotta say, right? So, what is also worse than murders are the murders in space. No gravity, very limited oxygen, and overwhelming cold darkness of the vacuum of space. Yep, it's pretty bad. Fortunately, Murders in Space, the game, is not. And it's a sequel to year prior's and much more popular and well-known Murders in Venice. The idea is an extension of originals, offering very similar gameplay, and it's also a mystery adventure game. What you aim to do in Murders in Space is to make sure that your crew survives 24 hours on the nondescript space station. The issue is, one of the astronauts is a cold-hearted killer, so your task is anything but easy. Especially that nothing really points to anyone in particular, at least not initially when you start the game. So what you'll be mainly doing is talking to all crew members and trying to be in the right place and time to prevent the killings. What times and places these are? Well, that's for you to figure out. And it's gonna be a task and a half, especially that each of the spacemen has something else to do in their schedule and often in different locations and different times. Despite very limited interactivity basically coming down to conversations with the crew and showing up to locations at certain times, the atmosphere of being alone on a remote space station with a killer on the loose is quite prominent if you like that kind of a thing. Generally speaking, even though the gameplay is rather slow, Murders in Space can be very enjoyable if you approach it with the right mindset, and let yourself get lost in dreadful realization of being the only one who can save others. Sadly, the game is not without issues. For one, you can ask only a few questions each time you see a crew member, and then you have to wait for them to move to a different location to be able to approach them again. And since each of them have some kind of a dark secret of their own, figuring out who the psychopath is can be really challenging. Worst of all, having the manual is a must, so even if you play a copy you found online, make sure to get manual too, as several important notes and passwords required during gameplay can only be found in it. I suppose it was a form of early analog DRM, but it's annoying having to either alt-tab to look stuff up in it, or print it out for a game you really don't know if you're going to like when you get it. Murders in Space is a very special title, and people either really like it or find it slow as snail and annoying as hell. Remember Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? Now, what animal is faster than the turtle? Think. Yeah, you obviously right, a cheetah is, but focus. What animal is faster than a turtle, slower than a cheetah, and also a rather peaceful creature? Oh, and it likes carrots if it's helpful. Yep, a rabbit. Nice. Now imagine a world without Ninja Turtles, but with Ninja Rabbits instead. Huh? What do you think? Wouldn't it be great? A fast-moving, agile and deadly rabbit? Well, our in-game Ninja Rabbit is anything but ninja. I mean, not only he's not working under the guise of darkness and mystery, but also sports blindingly white kimono that's incredibly easy to distinguish from the background. If anything, the game should be called Anti-Ninja Rabbits. But whatever, let's start at the beginning. You're tasked with saving some random factory for whatever the reason, which in itself is a stupid motivation as they come in a game about animals, but it is what it is. So naturally, to do so you traverse 3 not overlong stages beating up any and all animals and humans that come your way. Interestingly enough, despite you being a rabbit, most of them are much smaller than you are. Must be those vitamins in greens we kept hearing about as kids. If I would have eaten more veggies, I might have been bigger too. Perhaps even as big as a ninja rabbit. Still, while the graphics are not bad, they're not spectacular and sound is, well, present in the game. The gameplay, however, is where Ninja Rabbits really shows what it's made of. And it's mainly manure, it seems, as it's not only boring, but even the combat, so supposedly the most fun part of it, feels like an afterthought with no weight behind any of the hits. Sure, blood specks fly everywhere when you hit anyone, but gore has hardly ever saved the game. Now, just because I'm dumping on Ninja Rabbits my little puss of disappointment, it doesn't mean that the game like it doesn't have its uses. Because it does. I mean, if you wake up one day and feel like it would be cool to complete a really bad game, then Ninja Rabbit's 3 levels shouldn't take you too long and you'll have your wish granted in like an hour or so. Or, if you'd like to show someone how not to make a side-scrolling beat-em-up, it can also serve as a pretty good example of that. See? I'm not just a glass half empty. I see some light in this otherwise dark tunnel of a bad game. Ninja Rabbids is not broken, it's just not fun. Have I covered worst games before? More than once, easily few dozen. But with a name like that, Ninja Rabbids gave me false hopes for a fun title. Perhaps the fault is partly on my side for overhyping myself with Ninja Turtles initially, but it changes nothing, the game is not good. Okay, I will most likely butcher this title cause it's part English, part Korean, and I'm neither, but Olmang Jolmang Paradise is an arcade shooter made by Korean developer called Family Production, featuring characters from their other games. It's a third-person from behind-the-back 3D shooter, conceptually similar to Space Harrier. Up to 2 players can have a go at it at once and pick between 8 Family Productions characters to play as. There are 2 ships from Illusion Blaze, 2 mechs from Iron Blood, 2 heroes from P and Gitty, and Shaki and his wife from Shaki the Wolf. And if those names sound alien to you, that's alright, cause while the games were published in the West, they were really obscure and hardly anyone knew of them. Each of the 8 characters has their own unique weapon, thematically correct to the game they came from, and a special super attack that depletes their health, but is incredibly powerful when used against the enemies. And since we're on the enemies, there are tons of these, and they differ in design quite considerably, even if largely serving the same function. So being a cannon fodder on your way to the bosses, which in itself are pretty fun to beat even if not overly challenging. Every character starts at his/hers/its unique stage, but after completing it the remaining ones are identical to all of them. There are no weapon power-ups in the game, which is tad disappointing, but I suppose a number of different characters makes up a bit for it. You do get to collect money from defeated enemies though, and it can be spent in the shops where you can purchase additional lives, sidekicks to help you and other useful items. Olmang Jolmang Paradise may not be the most innovative or creative game out there, but it's just fun. It took other games' simple gameplay formula, polished it up with fresh coat of paint, meaning high quality colorful graphics and fast sprite scaling on a bed of lush backgrounds, added decent sounds and music to round up the presentation, and finished it off with a really enjoyable and fast gameplay loop. It's a package. And while there's not much novelty in OJP other than the bosses and different characters you play as, it's surprisingly addicting and you'll hardly want to put it away if you start playing. And that's as much as one can expect from a good game. Also makes me wonder why it wasn't as popular as it could have been given how decent it is. It may be a combination of things though. It released under DOS in 1995 when Windows gaming was already spreading its wings, and came from Far East with what I can only imagine was a minuscule marketing budget. I have obviously no proof to support these claims, it's just how I feel. One way or another, it's a great game. What a start to the new season of our DOS series, don't you think? Each game, even if not great, seems to be unique in its own right. But it's irrelevant how I feel about them. What do you think? Were any interesting to you? Or maybe you found something to try out? Let me know in the comments below. Oh, and mega 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 mega. I think it's about right now. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below. If you didn't, well then there's thumbs down there too. But I suppose you wouldn't have persevered up to this point if you really didn't. Around 60% of you are not subscribed, and there's currently no way of knowing if YouTube will decide to recommend you the next episode or not, other than subscribing and hitting that bell, that is. And when you hit that bell, whenever the new video is out, YouTube will actually send you a small and friendly notification about it, so you wouldn't miss it. If you'd like to support the channel, Patreon and YouTube memberships are a great way of doing so. They will help me release better content, and also they get first dibs on all new videos before they're publicly accessible on YouTube. If you can't or don't want to do that though, likes and subscribes are great too. I would like to take a moment here and thank all the YouTube creators from whose videos short bits were taken to serve as a background to my commentary. They're amazing and stars among the retro community. You will find names of their channels at the top of the screen when their footage is running, and also in the video description below. For me though, this is all, so have a good one and I'll see you next time. Peace.